Hi, welcome into this Warriors-Lions preview. I'm BJ Larmuck, the sports editor of the East Texan.
I'm Mitchell Brewer, the football reporter of the Winonan.
And we're going to talk a little bit about this big football game, Mitchell, that's coming up this weekend. Fourth-seeded Winona State hosting the first-round playoff action against fifth-seeded A&M Commerce. And before we get going into the playoff talk, let's take a look back as to how we got here. So describe the 2017 season as a whole for the Warriors.
The 2017 season was a very big season for Winona. It was coming off of a couple of all right years. They've continued to just sort of improve as the years have gone on, and this year was probably the pinnacle of that. The defense looked great pretty much all year long, and the offense was able to keep right along with them. And very big year. We only lost once, and really most of our games were won in pretty dominant fashion. So it was a very good year to be on the Winona State football team.
Yeah, you could say the same thing for the Lions of A&M Commerce. They came in 9-1, the overall record. One game dropped from last year to this year, out of their control. One of their conference foes decided in between the year that they don't want to be beating around the Lone Star, I guess. So they decided to go back down to the NAIA. But 9-1, only loss was to a pretty fired up Midwestern State squad, which last time we checked, they hadn't lost a game yet. And oh, by the way, that was in Wichita Falls. But the Lions, other than the first three quarters of that game against Midwestern State, looked to be one of the best teams in the country. They got up as high as number 2. At one point, they were right behind Northwest Missouri State. And who would have thought that after we lost, we'd end up still being higher than the Bearcats? They fell on a couple of losses in a row, but the Lions looked pretty dominant all season long. And, other than the first three quarters of a game that they came back and almost won, looking at 5 more minutes on the clock, they probably would be hosting a playoff game and maybe not even playing in Minnesota this weekend. So, based on that, the regional rankings came out here in the past few weeks. And for the Lions, they seem to be all over the place, as low as number 8 and then worked our way up to the 5th seed. You guys were pretty comfortable in where you guys stood. You were started off at number 1, lost to Mankato, who ended up being the 2nd seed, and then 3 straight weeks at number 4. You think the Warriors were happy with their matchup, their seeding? At least they get to host a first-round playoff game at home and don't have to they get at least what you would think have the home field advantage.
I absolutely think they are happy. Obviously, it would have been nice to take home that win against Mankato, but I would say definitely an advantage for Winona to be at home. They were undefeated at home throughout the entire season, and they've done pretty well here. And yeah, I would obviously say that's an advantage for Winona going into this weekend.
Yeah, and the Lions, of course, undefeated as well at home. They started off where it was looking like we're not even going to make it in, and we're, in the top 10 in the country. So how do you justify keeping us that low in the region? I guess the strength of schedule hurt. Not having that extra game shouldn't count against you as much as it did, but 10 games versus 11, you gotta win the games when you can, and if Lions had been able to do that, then they probably would have gotten much more love from the regional rankings.
I'd agree with that.
So what are some things that we can expect when the Warriors have the ball offensively? What are some of the standout talents, or what kinds of things do the Warriors do offensively that will give teams trouble?
A very high-powered rushing attack. This year it's kind of been just going along with the team itself is just improving week by week. Eric Berth and Javian Roebuck, they've just constantly kept getting better week in and week out. And I believe at one point they're up to a 5-week stretch of over 200 rushing yards. And they've just been pretty much a very focal point in the offense. And they've been able to get the team downfield, get the much-needed touchdowns. And, a bunch of games where defense forces turnovers, they've been able to capitalize and get a bigger lead for the Warriors.
Yeah, the Lions offensively, they come out with more of an air raid attack than we've seen. Under head coach Colby Carthel, we've seen a switch from more rushing ground and pound attack to an air raid, but it's worked. You've got the most prolific quarterback in program history, and he's only been here for 2 seasons, and he's already has all the records in Lion football history for passing, and just a superb athlete in Luis Perez, a great backstory for him. He ended up not playing high school football. He was going to be a bowler. He bowled at least 12 or 13 perfect games bowling. And so to have that and not be taken seriously coming out of high school, that's, the fact that he now has shown his worth and is seriously like a sleeper pick in the draft coming up next year, I think that it's been a fantastic turnaround for him. But it is more of an air raid, but the Lions do have some talent when they rush the ball, and that may be something that they'll have to focus on more this weekend, is that ground and pound attack. With the weather conditions, you talked a little bit about the Warriors on defense, and the Lions are pretty dominant defensively themselves. What kinds of things do the Warriors do that or just give teams nightmares with the stopping of the run, or are they able to shut down the pass? What is it about the defense for the Warriors?
This is a very good team at forcing turnovers, and I think that was highlighted perfectly in their last regular season game. They were able to, once they get on a roll, it just seems like this is a very tough defense to just get any momentum against. And it really showed, like I said, against the last game, where they got one pick six, and then on the next drive they got another interception, and then on the next drive they had another interception. So just the volume that they can play at, and just continuing to get better and better as the game goes on, is a very big strength, I would say, of the Warriors.
Yeah, the Lions were one of the best teams in the Lone Star Conference and Division II defensively. So much defensive talent that they're not leading in the individual numbers because they have so many guys that they rotate in and out to keep players fresh, that you're not sure you've got at least 2 or 3 guys that I think Yusef Sterling Lowe, Garrett Blueball, there's several players that are draft worthy that don't get as much playing time just because there's so many other dominant defensive players that it just as a whole is a nightmare. It's resemblant of one of those NFL defenses that got a cool nickname back in the day, like the Purple People Eaters or the Steel Curtain. So for defensively, the Lions are one of the best, if not the best, in the Lone Star Conference, one of the better squads defensively in Division II. And it's going to be interesting to see. This might not be a high-scoring game, especially with the weather conditions looking like, 31 and snow Saturday afternoon?
Yep, your typical November Minnesota weather.
Oh, that'll be fun. That's something that the Lions have definitely not seen this year. Now, last year and the year before that, they've had to make some trips up to Michigan, right next door, taking on first Ferris State and then Grand Valley State. And oh boy, those were not the funnest of times for the Lions. But hopefully this squad is not going to be fazed by the weather. It's just something that is out of their control. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game on it come Saturday, but we'll get more into our predictions here later on. We've talked a little bit about the coaching pedigree. Lions are making their 3rd straight playoff appearance, and some might argue it should be their 4th in a row under Colby Carthel, who's just now in his 5th season, turned this program around from 1-9 days just 5 years ago. Your coach Tom Sawyer has been at Winona since '96. What kinds of things does the coaching come into play in a game like this? When playoff atmosphere, trickeration. Is there something that the Lions might need to worry about with come late in the game? What might be going through Coach Sawyer's mind?
I think, like you said, his experience. I think that's a really big thing that he has, and maybe his ability, maybe have seen some of the stuff before and maybe been here before. And I think that could be a big factor in Sawyer's strategy going forward on Saturday. I think I would just say, his experience would be something to watch. And he's had 6 playoff appearances, so there's a lot of that there.
Yeah, and with Carthel, you never know what you're going to get. You could watch him coach for all 5 years, kind of have an idea of what he's going to pull out of his playbook at any given time, and then he'll throw something completely new at you. He is not afraid to be the riverboat gambler, as if you will. And so, don't ever assume that a drive is over just because here comes the punt formation, and that'll be a good segue into the special teams question. But a lot of things that the Lions will be able to throw out are some different looks on different downs, and just keeping the Warriors guessing. It would be my guess as to what Coach Carthel and his staff will have in mind for Saturday. So Lions have a pretty good kicker. He just broke the school record for points all time in a career. His name is Christoph Martinez. With weather conditions, lots of punts could probably be expected come Saturday. How big is it going to be special teams wise with the Warriors coming into that game?
I think that's a very underrated part of this Winona State team, is that they have a great punter and a very solid kicker. They've been able to make really big plays. And I remember during the homecoming game for Winona, there's 2 big punts by Michael Johnson. Yeah, Michael Johnson. And they set up big defensive plays, and they set up just very big defensive stops that led to points, that led to better field position for the offense. And Carter McCauley, he's been very solid, as I said earlier. He doesn't really miss much. He's been a very good kicker. He came from a soccer background and transitioned into football, and he's done very well at that, I would say.
Yeah, I already a little bit mentioned Christoph Martinez, the kicker. What I didn't mention is the 2-headed monster that the Lions call a punt formation. They have 2 very accurate punters in Tristan Perry and Jacob Viquez. One's right-footed, the other's left-footed. So you may not be expecting who's ever going to get the ball. And the Lions definitely have some trickery with the punt formation as well. Not leading any statistical charts, but they have a pretty underrated punter that doesn't get that much playing time. I think he has 2 punts all year, but he's been really good, and so that might be something that we call out one of the trickery, the trick plays in the bag for Carthel. That might be something that the Warriors won't be expecting. But we talked about kicking and punting. What about on the other side, punt returns, kick returns? Lions have some pretty good talent in returning the ball. Buck Wilson and Sean Hooks, if he's able to go, he's been sidelined with rehabbing an injury from earlier this year. He should be able to play. No official word on that as of this time. But Lions have some pretty good talent in terms of trying to return the rock. What do you say about the Warriors in terms of with their returns?
That is another very strong point in the Winona team. Jake Ballou, he's been very strong all season. Last week he had a kick return to start off the game, and he's been very good at that. Punt returns, he's been very good there. I believe he set a single season record at punt return touchdowns this year. So obviously a very big threat whenever he gets the ball. And I think you could definitely say special teams is something where the Winona State Warriors are definitely prepared and ready to succeed at.
Yeah, one thing I will say about Coach Carthel and his staff, they definitely do not underestimate the value of special teams and having that solid foot, if you will, to stand on when it comes to special teams. So I think these 2 teams are very strong, very prolific. 1 p.m. snow game, Saturday afternoon. If you have to, all biases aside, what are you gonna expect to see come Saturday, and who moves on to face off with Central Washington and Ellensburg next week?
I think that the home field advantage may come into play for Winona. We had to play in a pretty cold game last week. I think it's going to be really close. I think it's going to be, like you said, a very big who can get the upper hand on defense and who can, on the opposite side, get through such 2 big defenses. I think it's going to be close. I think it's probably going to be – it could come down to a kick. I think it's going to be 17-14 Winona.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you. It's going to be a tight game throughout. Both teams are going to be struggling to get something going, and whoever is able to penetrate through through the line offensively and not take that weather into a factor, will be able to win. I do think it'll come down to a late game kick, but my money's got to be on the all-time Lions scorer, Christoph Martinez. I think he puts a late field goal through with about 2.5 minutes to go. Lion defense gets one final stop that gives them the upset win and sends them on the road. I say 20-17, but it'll definitely be an interesting game. Looking forward to seeing it on Saturday, and best of luck to the Warriors. Hopefully we may not have to see each other again for quite a while.
Best of luck to you guys too, and I think it'll be a great game as well.
Yeah, this is definitely one that will probably be not as highly examined come Saturday with all the other matchups, but one that should be. I think this will be a very underrated 4 versus 5 matchup. Both of these teams could just as easily be higher up with the seeding, and if they were in other super regions, they might be the 1 and 2 seeds. It's that close in this region.
Absolutely.
Well, Mitchell, thanks for being here. Of course, it was always a pleasure to get a chance to look ahead to a matchup, and whoever wins, hopefully we can continue this on to next week as we're getting around the Thanksgiving holiday, and as the D2 playoffs continue, it'll be definitely something that we'll keep in mind.
I hope so too. I wish you guys the best of success, and thanks for having me. It's been
absolutely. So once again, I'm BJ Larmoke, sports editor of the East Texan.
I'm Mitchell Brewer, football reporter for the Winonan.
And we thank you for watching, and we'll see you at the game.